Thanks, Claire. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our second session of the day and our last session of the workshop. Just a reminder, the attendees do not have access to the chat, but you can use the Q&A to ask questions. We had a lot of really great questions last session, so keep on going. But also you can use, there's a little voting button, so you can upvote questions that you'd like, and that helps us prioritize which ones are the ones that we really like. So go ahead and use that function. And now for this afternoon, we have our national organization's perspective on the planning for the eclipses. Our first speaker and the host of the panel is Alex Young, who is the Associate Director for Science at NASA Goddard's Heliophysics Science Division. He leads the NASA Heliophysics Education Activation Team, and he co-led NASA's planning for the 2017 eclipse and will be leading again for the 23 and 24. Alex's eclipse coordination co-lead is Shannon Reed, and she will be managing the Q&A. And take it away, Alex.
All right. Thank you, Angela. Let me pull up my slides and share my screen. 1 second. Okay, hold on there. Okay. Can you see my title slide?
Looks like we're seeing your whole desktop at the moment. Or are you in presenter mode?
It looks like presenter mode.
Yeah.
If you do swap displays up on the top left, it should work.
Okay.
Just do that again and then click swap displays up on the top left.
Thought I'd worked
over.
Out, but... Oh, I see. Okay, sorry, give me 1 second. Okay, do you see the title slide now?
Yes.
Yes, now you got it. Well, you're not on the title
great,
slide
thanks.
anymore. Oh yeah, here you go. Okay, good.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for everyone who's staying for the last session. I know what it's like to be a speaker in the last session of the day for a conference, so I appreciate it, and especially on a Saturday. So today we're going to have a panel on planning at federal agencies. And so we'll start off with this presentation, which is from the NASA perspective. And the reason being that NASA was one of the primary federal agencies that supported the eclipse in 2017 and has worked a lot with other federal agencies, and will be continuing to do this for 2023 and 2024. So my goal today is to provide a real high-level overview of the NASA activities and NASA's role for 2017, and then to step into what are our current plans for 2023, 2024, based on our experience from 2017. And really, the ultimate goal is to set the stage for input from the community, because the real focus of this, both talk and panel, is to get some ideas from what interaction with state and federal agencies was most helpful, what worked, what didn't work, and what does the community need from the state and particularly federal agencies for their activities for 2023 and 2024. Some of our lessons learned were a combination of both places where our activities were very successful, and places where we definitely know we have a large room for improvement, some things we didn't anticipate, and what we're hoping to really step into for 2023 and 2024. One of the aspects, and it actually was a little bit of surprise to me, is that NASA didn't really fully recognize the importance of NASA's brand and the respect that NASA has as a science organization. But it does provide a lot of opportunity to leverage its resources to share with the community. Coordination was extremely important, and that's both within NASA and beyond. It was NASA is often seen as this monolithic organization, but it's actually has a lot of parts, not only different divisions, for example, human space flight and science, but also 9 different NASA centers across the country. So it was quite a task to round up all of was going on within NASA and to make sure that everyone was on the same page. And what I'll mention in a second is about how we stepped into and when we stepped into planning for 2017 was a critical place where we are hoping to do a lot better because we're starting much earlier this time. Sustainability is going to be really important. NASA had not done this kind of engagement for an Eclipse. 2017 was really seen as a one-off event. And so from that perspective, we're really trying to think longer term this time than just 2023 and 2024. But also, one of the things that many people didn't quite recognize, and actually some of this came out of a really cool study that was done by the Exploratorium looking at Twitter engagement after the event, is a lot of people spent a lot of time doing a lot of amazing work leading up to the event. And when it was over, a lot of people went home. And I know there's a lot of local groups that did a fantastic job having much longer term events that went beyond the day of the eclipse. But a lot of people really, were done and went home, and the public really wanted more. And it was also an opportunity when we had the public engaged to really engage them beyond just the eclipse, to talk about a lot of other science that's important that we could share. And so we had their attention, and there's a lot more we can do with that. A lot of work in simplicity. Scientists often get caught up in maybe get a little bit too caught in their head and a little bit too technical. And that was a challenge in trying to really rein in to have simple explanations and simple demonstrations. Something that we certainly learned a lot from what others in the community have done. Also, a single website. NASA has a problem with having too many websites. NASA has an amazing amount of fantastic information, but it's scattered across a lot of different websites. I mean, right now, NASA is under a massive undertaking to try to change that. And so that was really a key places was really focusing on having a central website where we could share what everyone else was doing. And we think that was reasonably successful, and we're looking forward to making it even more successful next time. And then lastly, having a unified message, and this comes back to coordination, but in general, having everything point to a central location and be very organized in our messaging. So the decision to support the Eclipse from an agency level was relatively late. Now, this is certainly not true for many different parts of NASA, many different scientists and education and outreach groups. But as an agency, the decision was made in September 2016. And so it wasn't until almost into 2017 that we were really, really fully engaged. And that led to a lot of duplication of effort, and we weren't as aware of what was going on both across the agency and outside. And that's something that we're excited to be in a different position this time. So we did a lot of different things. We supported a lot of different work across the community and across the globe. But from our teams, both the Heliophysics Education Consortium, which did a lot of the groundwork planning, as well as the coordination up to the headquarters level, we had our website, which was our central point. And we worked for a lot of collaboration within. It was primarily led by what's called SMD, the Science Mission Directorate, as well as working with a lot of external organizations such as AAS, NSF, agencies, Department of Commerce, Interior, DOT, FEMA, and partners like the Exploratorium. We had a lot of official viewing sites. This was kind of like the plan was sort of like a New Year's Eve event, going from point to point across the nation to have a large broadcast that went over 4 hours, and to connect starting with first contact off the coast of Oregon from an airplane ending off the coast of South Carolina. And that was a massive undertaking. It was quite a technically challenging event. We supported a lot of events across the country, both within the path and outside the path. And that included providing glasses, supporting materials, as well as helping find SMEs. And this was especially important for outside the path because, of course, a lot of the scientists wanted to be in the path. And we tried to work to be a general depot to help share what was happening across the country. We focused on 5 areas: safety, science, education, public engagement, and citizen science. And I'll just step through them relatively quickly. Safety was the #1 focus. This was the most important part. And our relationship with the AAS in particular was critical. The AAS were really the organization that championed solar viewing safety. We heard about this yesterday. So our relationship with them was critical, and we made sure that whatever we had and we were sharing was completely up to date with what the AAS was doing. And then as things got more complicated, especially with the Amazon initially selling bogus glasses, we really just started focusing back to their website because the information was being updated and at a very fast pace, particularly being led by Rick. We also did a lot of work on trying to share other types of safety, the things that are most critical, especially for local planning. And given the fact that this was in the summer, a lot of issues, including things like heat safety, but we talked about car travel, camping, all of those sorts of areas that were critical for planning events, both individually and in groups. For science, we brought in a huge amount of assets. And these included not just the missions that were focused on the sun and the solar corona, but of course, lunar missions like LRO. Really one of our 2 stalwarts for the solar aspect were SDO, the Solar Dynamics Observatory, and SOHO. But we also had support from missions like Day, from JAXA, a lot of NOAA missions that were giving us observations of the Earth atmosphere as well as the ground to see the shadow moving across the country. And then we had a huge collection of high-altitude balloons, several high-altitude planes, and even the ISS. As far as education and communications, there was a lot of products that we produced, everything from public service announcements, videos about safety, webinars for the media, a lot of media toolkits, training materials for subject matter experts, groups like the Solar System Ambassadors, as well as educator kits that we distributed many tens of thousands of. Public engagement, we had the events across the country, both the broadcast events as well as a lot of the local events that we supported. But this was an exciting opportunity to share, especially on our website, to connect with what other places were doing, the National Park Services, zoos, libraries. And so we had a lot of different sets of maps so people could find out what was happening across the country. Citizen science was important. We had both citizen science and Earth groups like the Globe Group, supporting groups like Citizen Kate with telescopes across the country, as well as the Eclipse ballooning project, which was really important. And we worked to help develop the backbone through a service called Live to do the live streaming. So for the plans for 2023 and 2024, based on what we did for 2017, we came in late. We did a lot of things that we didn't have time to coordinate. We didn't have as good a coordination, even with groups like AAS. So one of our most important directions here is to really focus with the community, because our ultimate goal is to support the community, to provide whatever resources we can, and to find out what is most important, what does the community need most from us. And that is one of the primary focuses, is to find out what you, the community, need from NASA, as well as from other federal agencies, because our position allows us to do a lot of the coordination at the federal level across the different federal agencies and organizations. So what we're doing, focusing just on coordination, is we have an Eclipse Advisory Council, which is both an internal across NASA, across federal agencies, as well as external outside of just the government, to bring in the important professional organizations, for example, the AAS. There is interagency coordination. This is done at the highest levels of the government, including groups like DOT, FEMA, and this is going to be led by NASA officials that are not yet determined. We also have the education community within the Science Mission Directorate, and there is a lot of Eclipse activity across those groups. And the Eclipse Education Action Group will be led by Shannon Reed. We had a Eclipse community for 2017 with a listserv as well as regular meetings, and we'll be doing the same for 2023 and 2024. Currently, we're still setting up some of the tech aspects of it. And so what we've done is we created a forum for people to sign up to be part of the listserv. The technology has changed from what we did in 2017. And as I'll mention in the next slide, we're also have questions for the community about what your needs are that are also included in the form. That it's optional. The form is primarily designed to sign up for the listserv, but we also would love to get your input. One of the key areas that we've been working on is leveraging other resources and partnerships, something that we didn't have time to really do for 2017. So for example, we're working on the highest level, one of the highest levels of agreement between a person's or organizations with NASA is a Space Act agreement. So we're currently working on Space Act agreements with Michael Zeiler and Fred Esmanak to share their resources through NASA. And also we're working on a Space Act agreement between AAS, NASA, and NSF. And this is to co-brand resources. Some of the resources that I showed, flyers, educator kits, we would like to try to not duplicate efforts. And so one of the things we want to do is be able to create resources that we can just share amongst these different organizations and make available free to the community. So again, we'll have this form, and I will make sure that it's put into the chat. The form we have primarily, again, for the listserv to be part of the community, and then we'll eventually start regular meetings through that. But also we have several questions. So these questions are also the driving questions for the panel when we come up to the next part of this session. And these include what sort of interaction did you or do you have with state and federal agencies for eclipse planning? What worked or didn't work with your federal and state interactions? What interaction would you have liked to have had? And what are your suggestions for state and federal agencies? And what are your needs from state and federal agencies? And then lastly, something that we added recently, we are putting together a website, but we also recognize that there are a lot of fantastic resources that we don't want to duplicate. One of the reasons why we're working on the Space Act agreement, but also, of course, we have safety and other areas that are on the AAS, and there are many great websites across the country that we want to connect with. So what is most useful on a NASA website, a NASA Eclipse website? So before we we'll have a Q&A after this presentation, but I wanted to introduce the panelists that we have for the next part. There are 4 panelists who have experience from both 2017 as well as planning for 2023 and 2024. We have Brook Kaufman from Visit Casper, Patrick Sun from the National Operations Center of Excellence, Catlett from the Texas Eclipse Task Force, and Rick Yeames from the New Hampshire Eclipse Task Force. And so Brook Kaufman, she's a longtime lover of the Cowboy State. Brook officially became a Pokey after earning her master's degree from the University of Wyoming. Today, Brook is the CEO of Visit Casper, where she leads the charge to grow the local visitor economy and serves as a member of the Natrian County Commission. And while she works on a variety of events year-round, one of the most memorable was the Wyoming Eclipse Festival in 2017. Through Brook's leadership for the event, her community embraced the total solar eclipse, garnered significant media coverage, increased destination awareness, and welcomed tens of thousands of travelers from around the world. Now, Patrick Sun is the managing director of the National Operations Center for Excellence, dedicated to serving the emerging transportation systems management and operations TSMO community. Patrick is a registered civil engineer with more than 14 years of experience, with a bachelor's and master's in civil engineering, an executive master's in leadership, and a leadership degree from Georgetown University. Victoria Catlett is a junior in physics and applied mathematics undergraduate at the University of Texas, Dallas. She's an avid astrophysics researcher with several publications and will intern soon at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics this summer to study black holes. She also runs the Step Up Student Agent Program, an APS-funded initiative, which encourages high school women to pursue physics, and they frequently engage in local community. Is the president of the Society of Physics Students at UTD, and also congratulate Kat today because she just finished her physics GRE. Rick Yeames has been a Domino's Pizza logo franchisee for the past 30 years in Concord, New Hampshire. Was born in Connecticut, received a BS in biology from UConn in 1981. Moving to New Hampshire in 1988, he became a Domino's logo franchisee in 1990. Over the past 6 years, Rick has become passionate about logo, locally owned great operators business, peace, and solar eclipses. Becoming a unique networker and transformational leader, he is hard at work advocating for his campaign locally and globally. He's an amateur affiliate of the AAS and founder of the New Hampshire Eclipse Task Force. And lastly, I'll put up my email and Shannon Reed's email at NASA, and I'll stop here to answer any questions. So let me, okay.
All right, thank you, Alex. We have a few questions in the chat. Padma Yanamandra Fisher has some questions, two questions. She says, how do we find out about the NASA broadcast events?
That's a great question. And first, NASA has to figure out where those broadcasts are going to be. If we end up doing the same sort of system that we did for 2017, we will pick key sites along the path of totality for the broadcast. Those sites are typically limited to what sort of resources are needed to have a large broadcast. And each site is run by a different NASA center. Each NASA center has their own TV studio and production team. So that will be determined hopefully in the near future, and we'll make sure to let you know.
Okay. Her next question is, what materials, especially new, is NASA working on now?
Well, we have a lot of the same types of materials that we had in the past, safety flyers, general Eclipse information. One of the other aspects that we're working on is we had a large amount of Spanish materials last time, but we want to make sure that all of our materials are Spanish this time. So that's an area that we'll be working on. And part of it will be determined to a large extent out of this particular working, the working group from the AAS. Because we will be co-branding our materials, the task force itself will be determining what are the primary materials that are most useful for both education and public engagement, and that will drive what types of materials we produce.
Okay. Wayne Wooten has a statement and a question. It's President Obama hosted several astronomy gazes at the White House. Is there any hope that President Biden will bring these back? They were great for publicity for STEM education.
That's a great question. That is certainly my hope. I participated in some of those at the White House. They were fantastic. Unfortunately, we didn't have any in the previous administration, even pre-COVID. I'm hoping that will happen. Now, I don't know, what sort of limitations COVID is going to cause with that, even though, those events were outside. We do have we have representatives from OSTP that are part of the NASA's, the Science Mission Directorate's education community. So I'm hoping that that connection will allow us to sort of reinvigorate that type of engagement that happened in the administration before the Trump administration. So I'm looking at the timing. So I think that is the end of the timing for the Q&A. So I think that it's a good time for us to switch over to the panel members. So what we're going to do is each panelist is going to have about 5 minutes to talk, and some will present some slides. And then after that, we'll have the guiding questions to start the conversation amongst all of the panelists. So the first speaker will be Brook Kaufman. And
Yep, thanks, Alex.
Okay.
I'll start my video and then we'll see if we can do a slide share real quick. Or screen share. Okay. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. As Alex said, my name is Brook Kaufman and I am the CEO of Visit Casper. We were blessed to be on the center line in 2017. We had an incredible view. Our community spent an awful lot of time figuring out how to do it and how to do it right and not have it cost $1 million. And one of the things I'm just going to run through quickly, and Alex, if I pre-answer some of the questions we're going to get into, I apologize, but I will try to keep this to 4 or 5 minutes. One of the things that's been really interesting is to have other communities reach out now, and they're not sure who should lead the effort, and they're not sure if the other agencies know. So as we get into some things that would be helpful down the road, I think Casper really found out about the Eclipse the first time 5 years prior when the Astronomical League came in and booked their conference center for their convention. And our community said, yeah, right, like what is an eclipse? No one's going to travel for this. It's probably not really happening. So I think there was just a lot of confusion about, is this thing even legitimate? Is it happening? How do communities find out that they're on the center line if nobody's paying attention? So anyways, my first slide is, I don't know if this happens a lot at the local level, and you guys might know more than I do, but it's a really tough thing to figure out who is going to be in charge and leading the effort in the communities that are on the center line, and if they're going to do any kind of planning at all. So our city didn't want to take the lead, our county didn't want to take the lead, our emergency management didn't want to take the lead. They, at some level, you've got to find a mix of the people who want to plan the event and people who want to keep people safe. So it probably took 18 months just for us to figure out the effort in our community was actually led by the tourism office. And then we were the coordinators, the chief coordinators with all of the emergency response personnel. through the whole thing. So we can get into that, but one, I would say no one at the local level necessarily wanted to lead it. And two, it's really critical that we know that it's happening in the communities that are on the center line. So what interactions did we have with state and federal agencies? I'm probably a little bit more in the lane of, we worked a lot with state because we were local, but I hope I can provide something that's helpful today. We had very limited interaction with federal agencies outside of the BLM. So half of our county and around half of the state of Wyoming is actually federal lands. So they were very involved as far as an access perspective or viewing or how to keep people safe from that way. In reaching out to our emergency management personnel, the FBI and Immigrations and Customs Enforcement was also involved on the incident planning side. So they were a participant in that. On the state level, we did work with an awful lot of agencies, including the Office of Tourism, the Game and Fish Department. So obviously from a water access and land that our commission owns. State Parks was instrumental, and I hope to get into some of that because one of the things they gave feedback on is a toolkit for people who are in the state parks while they're actually viewing. How do they help facilitate the education and information while people are on site? The other thing was, Wyoming Department of Transportation, and my next slide will show you this. And then the Department of Ag was also involved because of a lot of licensing as people travel and food is provided. They were involved in that way. So I would say the federal agency that our state had the most interaction with, as I reached out to some of our state directors, was the Office of Homeland Security. So they were actually really instrumental, and they worked very closely together through this, as well as the other 14 states that were impacted on the center line. So let's talk quickly about what didn't work. I'm sure this picture isn't a surprise to anyone, but that's I-25 traffic after the eclipse. So we underestimated the exit after the eclipse. I would say in all areas of Wyoming, we had several 100,000 people trying to leave the state at the same time. We didn't have the infrastructure set up. So we were a very rural state. So the access to water, toilets, a lot of people idled on I-25 for, an average trip is 4 hours, I guess, on a normal day, and it took 10 to 12 hours to get back to Denver. So I would say that was a big miss on our part. We probably didn't understand the impact that way. We also underestimated the amount of education. So as I listened to Alex's presentation, one of the things that will probably surprise a lot of people on this today is many people, as we educated our community that the eclipse was coming, thought that it was at night. So even if it's at 11:42, they thought they would have to get out of bed and watch the eclipse, even though it's solar. So I would say we underestimated the amount of educating about the eclipse, that it actually was happening, that people would come. And then the last thing I would say that worked really well is that the Homeland Security Information Network here in Wyoming, the Wyoming Office of Homeland Security took the lead on coordinating that communication with 14 other states. So similar to NASA in the video, in real time, they were actually sharing information. If there would have been a mass, I want to say a shooting or something like that, like they were watching in real time as the whole thing kind of moved across, so that every state was connected to each other. What would we have liked to see? I would say what I envy about the 2024 eclipse is that it happened in 2017. So I think communities will be better prepared. One of the things I wish we would have had was a blueprint. I think there's a lot of fear when this happens, or when it comes to a community, because you don't know the avatar of a typical eclipse chaser. So I think your law enforcement personnel tends to think we're going to have a lot of crime and people stealing and looting. And honestly, the eclipse chasers are the best visitors we could have ever had in the state of Wyoming. So I think it would have been helpful to better understand what to expect. And I hope the people in 2024 will get that. And then as far as the state agencies, one, I want to know what's coming. I think that would be super helpful. Hopefully they all do. And then there's two sides of this eclipse, and that's why I love being involved on the NASA side. Is there's a really heavy science side, but there's also this experience side that people want when they come. So our eclipse was 1 minute and 42 seconds, but they were here for 5 days. So somewhere in there is a collaboration of giving people the experience that they want, and then also to view, that incredible celestial event. So the last slide, I think, pretty close. What role do you think NASA could play? I think one of the things, and Alex, I love everything that you shared. The education for us, I don't feel like it probably got down to the local level the way that maybe we just weren't aware of all the resources that you had available. And I think that would have been very helpful. The other thing that you said that I think is critical is you're right. NASA's got an incredible brand with a lot of authority in the space. So as people in communities are fighting to educate or to build authority that this is happening, these people are coming, having NASA at the table to say it is legitimate, you're not just pulling this out of the sky, I think would have been very helpful. So that's what I wanted to share so far, and we'll open it up in the Q&A.
Great. Thank you, Brooke.
Thank you.
So now I'm going to turn it over to Patrick.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alex. And welcome, everyone. Glad to be here. And I am going to try and share my screen, but just to give you a little bit of a context, my organization that I lead is really somewhat of this kind of facilitator and moderator throughout our transportation industry. So I work with all the state DOTs, federal, some of the local, and they really, it did take them a while to really understand the Eclipse, right? I remember this conversation that we had, a couple of the DOT secretaries at the state level. I tried to get them on board. I'm like, hey, this thing is coming. It's really important. NASA's involved. And they're like, okay, it's a couple minutes, is that a big thing? And that was about like 3 or 4 months ahead of the Eclipse. I think the next month I was, meeting with them in a different context. And they're like, Patrick, why is it that everyone's coming and talking to me about this Eclipse thing? And the whole Wyoming, Colorado, just traffic going from one state to the other was a very different type of event. And needless to say, one thing that the state DOTs and especially the federal level, so Lori Rattle from the last session, she actually, when she was kind of working, integrated me and started engaging. And next thing we knew, there was the fact sheet, then the communication, public information officers got together about the messaging. What do you put on the boards? What do you put on the dynamic message signs? All those overhead signs. And then you got the emergency managers, you got the planners of events, event planners, really working the nuts and bolts. And there were a lot of lessons learned. So what we aimed to do was have one place where the DOTs, the Department of Transportation, could share information in real time. And we just put it up on our website, right? So we created this page. Next thing you know, we just kept adding to it. AAS provided some information, NASA, a few things from FHW. We just collected it and sourced it and just let everyone know. But a couple of task forces came out and really talked about the communications plan, talked about the news releases, and really just getting on the same wavelength, same messaging. And that helped out tremendously. So the Eclipse came, everyone was happy. It's really nice when it's a very positive event. A lot of the resources were used. I can tell you in that year, this one page, because of the solar eclipse, our average views of a single web page on our website, this jumped about 3.5 times what our normal traffic was. So this is like, we were getting pinged like crazy. And I was like, wow. And they were real people too, of course. But it also just really helped to see, like what are the notification images that we could share and just, states willing to share it. After the Eclipse though, knowing that from 2017, we're going to come into 2024, we organized this virtual peer exchange back then because a lot of the people that had the knowledge, they were at the very local county level. So a lot of the states and the counties started working together. And so I'm just going to give you a kind of a rapid fire of some of these lessons learned I wanted to share and to give you perspective that the transportation practitioners that are out there at your DOTs, they understand the complexity and context of all this. So in Kentucky, which you also saw, and I echo all of Brook's traffic concerns, right? The traffic in wasn't the problem, it was the traffic out. And, the biggest lesson learned from everyone was we could do a whole lot better managing the traffic out. And there's a lot of options out there, but we just didn't anticipate. No one really knew, right? In Kentucky, Kansas, this is Kentucky, yes. One of the things they mentioned on one of their roads, a 222% jump, right? So that's massive, that's huge. Even just a couple of it, but 10-mile backup on the way out. So those were kind of the things. Another thing from Oregon, you heard it from kind of the previous speaker in the parks and looking at it. Something that can help, getting zip code data, just knowing where people are coming and going, potentially, right? We don't need to know exact location. We just want to get a really good sense. Is it everywhere? Is it some places? Where are the places being set up? And then improve the ways to disseminate travel time data. So just let people know. If you're stuck in a 5-hour long jam, like let them know a little bit how long it's going to take. Missouri, some of the lessons learned that they kind of said is prepare for the worst, hope for the best. The traffic turnout wasn't even close to the lowest of the estimates, but it still was congested to cause backup. So, this is the other perspective you all might not know, which is from a transportation DOT perspective, we had our estimates and we're like, well, actually it was below that, but it still caused a congestion. And the neighboring states, neighboring cities, they were all affected, as we saw. So there was a lot of potential with that. Let me, sorry, I had to, the little Zoom bar kind of didn't let me do it. A couple of things that, just to let you know, is we're getting so much better for special event management in transportation that there could be things that are set up ahead of time, mobile cameras, traffic counting equipment, satellite phones ended up not being a big help for, this was Wyoming. And then just, pump areas, rest areas, highway, and a couple of other things. So I'll send a link that I just wanted to mention. If you just go to our website, type in solar eclipse, you'll see all the lessons learned that came out of it. The main thing that I'll end with on this is the transportation departments, they are connected with a lot of the emergency managers because they all work together. And it was mentioned, like the exercises, that all can be taken advantage. And I think looking ahead, we worked a lot with the USDOT, Federal Highway Administration's Office of Operations. So one thing I communicated to Alex before our panel is that if we can get more and more of the executive leaders just to acknowledge the event, they don't need to be intimately involved. They just need to acknowledge it and give their staff permission to plan for it and get ready for it. That would be a big, just a big help. And it would activate resources in ways that we just probably, will learn for the next 2023 and 2024 eclipses. So let me stop there, and then Alex, back to you.
All right, great. Thank you, Patrick. And I have a question for you. We talked about, I'll wait till the panel discussion, but just to remind you about the difference in traffic, thinking about the cities. So that's something to think about, which we'll talk about. So let me turn it over to Kat now.
All right, hello everyone. Like Dr. Young mentioned, I just got out of a big exam, so I'm currently sitting in a Starbucks. I apologize for any of the background noise, but it's unavoidable. All right, I have some slides to show you. All right. So I was in high school for the 2017 eclipse, so I didn't participate in any large-scale planning. I just watched from a state park in Tennessee with my dad. However, I can certainly second all of the issues that other people have mentioned. For example, it took us 5 hours to drive to Tennessee and nearly 20 to get back because there was construction on top of all of the already heavy traffic. I don't yet know where I'm going to be for the 2023 or 2024 eclipses. I know some people already do, but I don't know where I'm going to grad school yet. So I'm just focusing on more large-scale planning as opposed to a small local event. So for the past few months, I've been working with the Solar Eclipse Task Force, or CTAF as we call it. This is different from the AAS task force that's organized this workshop, but it has a lot of similar goals. So this group is focusing on several things for the next eclipses. For example, the next total solar eclipse, the one in 2024, will occur on the same day as a lot of major sporting events. It'll be the exact same day as the 2024 men's NCAA basketball championship. So that could be a huge issue and a huge, awesome event for the city that hosts that. We are also, some of our members are also working on a national reading list to distribute to libraries to increase K-12 engagement with the Eclipse and teach them about what's going to happen. Next, this isn't on my slide, but on my own, I've been working on establishing Eclipse-themed hackathons, which are programming competitions for undergraduate students, to have these students create helpful apps for the event. And finally, here's the thing that's most relevant to our panel. Our task force has been working with national and state governments to have them declare the 2 upcoming Eclipse days as some sort of holiday. So the eclipse is going to happen whether or not the government says so. However, if they can recognize it through some simple legislation like a solar eclipse day proclamation, that will signal organizations across the country that they need to prepare and give them an excuse for any of their plans. For example, in 2017, a lot of schools ended up keeping their kids inside because they realized they didn't have a way to keep them safe. Because of course, kids would look up at the sun even if their teachers told them not to. So we don't want that to happen. We want kids to see the eclipse. So if there were to be a national declaration of solar eclipse day, that would alert schools way ahead of time that they need to make plans. And maybe now that we've done all this virtual learning through COVID, they could just schedule a virtual learning day for the eclipse and have parents instead take care of their kids during the eclipse. Now, we already have several congressmen on board with having just a simple solar eclipse day proclamation. And so our next step is to poke the congressperson that we think should be the one to put it forward. So we'll see how that goes. So we've already had some success with all of this. The New Hampshire Senate recently passed Senate Bill 105, which, among 2 other things, establishes April 8th, 2024 as Solar Eclipse Day, if this gets through the House as well. So Rick Yeames can tell you more about this because he's the one who led this endeavor. Now, I'm from Texas, and Texas is going to have both of the solar eclipses, so I'm focusing a lot of my efforts on the state. You can see here this really awesome logo that we have for our endeavors created by Tyler Nordgren. Yeah, this X here is made by the 2 solar eclipse paths, and this part of the boot signals that there's an annular eclipse and a total solar eclipse. All around, just an awesome creation there. So because it's having both eclipses, Texas has a lot of planning to do. In fact, the 2024 eclipse is going to pass over 3 major population centers in Texas: Austin, Dallas, and San Antonio. So this could create a logistical nightmare for these cities, especially with all that traffic we've talked about and all the issues that arises. So in addition to, or similar to the national planning we've been doing, I've been chatting with our state representatives to see if we can get a solar eclipse day proclamation like that, like Rick and his collaborators got in New Hampshire. So here's a map that I've been sending people that is the eclipse paths overlaid with our congressional districts. So I'm actually most interested in the Texas 21st district. That's the one highlighted here, because that's the one that will have both eclipses. All right, anyway, if any of you would like to contact me or get involved, here's my email, and I'll also send it in the chat. And with that, Rick and I are sharing slides, so I will hand it over to him.
Great, thanks, Kat. Take it away, Rick.
Rick,
Okay.
muted. There you go.
Okay. Yep. That was a sudden stop there, Kat, but thank you. Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Rick, for inviting me to be part of this panel today. I will just go through my slides. I do want to give a shout out, though, to Brook. I was actually in Casper for the 2017 eclipse. This is a picture of the group of solar eclipse chasers. I'm on the left there in the red t-shirt, and we are at about 3,000 feet, most of the way up Casper Mountain, looking out over the city of Casper. And this was, I believe, during stage 1 of the total solar eclipse. Great view, and Casper did a great job. I must say that. I got a t-shirt and a mug and had a really, really good time. So this is a group, again, most of us were from the New Hampshire Astronomical Society. We had a couple from the West Coast, but some of us had been chasing solar eclipses for 20, 25 years, and some of the rest of us were newbies. But it was really good because we really had a mix, and very powerful. Had been the first total solar eclipse that I had viewed, so it definitely left an impression on me. And from that date, the day after, I started planning for the next one that was going to come through New Hampshire. And I started very early because in talking to folks at the Eclipse Festival there in Casper, they had told me that they wish they had started a little bit earlier and gotten some of the government and some of the other organizations on board. So I started very, very early. About 2 years ago, I approached some of our local legislatures. And if someone could advance it to the next slide. Okay, this is the first time I'm seeing the slides in this order, so I'm going to step back from what we did. One of the things that I did before actually submitting the bill was linking Coos County, New Hampshire and Coos County, Oregon, or Coos Bay, Oregon, as a first in the nation solar eclipse campaign. And shortly after seeing that New Hampshire was going to experience the total solar eclipse, I was searching around and trying to get some information for Coos County, New Hampshire, and Coos County, Oregon popped up. And I said, that looks like it's near the annular eclipse. Yes, Jennifer, you're right. That is more Tyler art. I love his posters. I have a number of them throughout the country, and also wanted to use his for Texas. So basically, after realizing that New Hampshire and Oregon were both going to experience solar eclipses within 6 months of each other, I put together a first in the nation, Coos Bay, Oregon, Coos County, Oregon, and Coos County, New Hampshire for solar proclamation. We did this poster. We actually have a proclamation, and then I got a local write-up from David Brooks, who does the science writing for our local newspaper. And that was very exciting because what I found in 2017 is a lot of communities were sort of competing against each other. And, Carbondale was trying to get people to come there because they're going to have the 2017 one, and someone else was going to have the longest. And I said, how can we get communities working together? And I figured out that with these two events, 6 months apart, there's no competition directly. So now the two counties and ultimately the two states will hopefully be able to work together and be first in the nation. And you can, with all my proclamations and posters and campaigns right now across the US, a little bit with Maritimes, PEI, New Brunswick, Newfoundland, and starting to get Mazatlan with the total Mexico and Yucatan Peninsula with the annular, starting to get them involved with all of them. I'm working to have people work together instead of competing against each other. And also with all our campaigns, we involve government tourism, commerce, education, astronomers, and nonprofits. So we're all have some, or most of us have some connection to the astronomy realm, but getting from the get-go, nonprofits, commerce, of course, but educators, students and teachers involved, I think is really key to getting the general public involved at a very, very, very early time. So that's what we've done here between Coos County, New Hampshire and Coos County, Oregon. So now if someone could go to the next slide for me. Great. So this is a bill that we actually worked on. We had intended to get it to New Hampshire Governor Sununu's desk on or about April 8th to hit the T-3-year countdown date. Unfortunately, as with everything else on the planet, COVID interrupted. We had gotten through the New Hampshire House by a vote of like 244 to 67, overwhelming support, and that was great. But before we could get to the Senate, COVID hit. Then we had the election. So when we came back this year, we were told, well, since it got interrupted, there's been an election, you need to start all over again. So we went to the Senate, found a New Hampshire senator, Senator Erin Hennessy, who's up in Coos County here in New Hampshire, and she advanced it through the Senate committee, advanced it through the full Senate. It was voted on. We passed overwhelmingly, 23-1. So now we're back in front of the House. Unfortunately, with COVID again, we got delayed. We're not going to be able to tie it into the April 8th. However, here in New Hampshire, as we're going to have through a large part of the Northeast, we will have a sunrise partial solar eclipse on Thursday, June 10th. So now we're shooting to have New Hampshire Governor Sununu sign it on or about June 10th. And I don't know if the exact wording is coming up, but one of the things we discovered for any other states, provinces, or countries considering a similar bill is you want to make it really low-hanging fruit. You don't want to try to go to have it declared a holiday. Everyone gets off work, the kids don't have school, because legislatures tend to balk at that big a leap, that big an ask right off the get-go. So what we did, and we had much better luck, was just asking it to be recognized as a solar eclipse day. However, we did add a line in there saying the New Hampshire governor is asked to instruct all people to make it an educational day, and we're leaving it up to the individual communities and school systems how they want to determine it going on from there. So if I could go to the next slide. And that's it. So,
yeah, those are all the slides we have.
Okay. Thank you, Angela, for putting those together. I think I'm almost out of time, but I'm just going to take just one more minute. We do have the start. We have a proclamation between Maine, PEI, New Brunswick, and Newfoundland. So Ted Gull, I saw a comment there. If you want to reach out to me, I can share about that. Wayne Wooten, I just want to acknowledge your comments about having something at the White House are great. My thought would be, let's do it on October 14th. What better way to celebrate T-minus 2-year countdown to the ASE than to have something on the White House lawn that day or that evening. And final thing I was going to say, my one ask from Rick and Alex is to figure out a way to get the National Chamber of Commerce on board to talk to them at that level so that they can filter down to all the local chambers of commerce about this event coming. And we have already had issues here in New Hampshire, and I know they've had issues in Arkansas. People are looking to give their money to someone and to make a reservation, but no one is willing to take it, either because the computer system or they just have no system in place to take a reservation that early. So I think we need to put that in place to do that ahead of time. And final thing is, here in New Hampshire, we're going to link the TSC and the ASE. We're going to use the ASE as a dress rehearsal for our TSC. While it'll only be 20-25% here in New Hampshire, we're going to use that Saturday, October 14th, 2023, to do a dress rehearsal for our emergency response folks, hospitals, communications, restaurants, tourism, educators, everything else. And we encourage anyone else across the country to join us and do the same thing. So I think that's it for me, and I'll turn it back over to Alex.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rick. Just one quick question. So you, what's the status for the federal proclamation as opposed to just the state proclamations? Because you went through
Yeah,
the
so-
status of how you're doing for the state, but what's the status for the federal?
We have support from several congressmen, and I'm right now trying to convince one of them to actually put it forward.
Okay.
It needs to go through the Space
Is
Science
there-
and Technology Committee.
Oh, right. Okay. Is there any benefit for any other states to reach out to representatives to kind of add to that, or just let it go through what you're doing at the moment? I just was curious if you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think any state that has the eclipse should look into making a state level proclamation like New Hampshire has, and like they're trying to do in Texas, but also any extra national support we can gain would be greatly appreciated.
Okay.
And I sent my email in the chat. Anyone who wants to help
maybe
out with that,
maybe it would
let me know.
maybe it would be best for those to find out if they have which folks have representatives that might be on the particular committee. So that would be great. Cool. So Patrick, I didn't know if you wanted to say anything more what we talked about in terms of the difference in traffic for 2017 versus 2024, especially given the huge number of cities that it's going to go over.
Yeah, that definitely changes the approach of outreach, because 2017 was so unique. It brought so much attention to the national parks and rural areas, and they have their host of challenges that you all have heard. At the metropolitan level, who's in charge becomes a bigger thing. At the same time, the traffic network at a local and even a county level is very, there aren't that many options, or sometimes there's too many options, right? So there could be this effect that just every road gets jammed. And when that happens and you're gridlocked, the emergency management personnel get really nervous about it. There was a comment in the Q&A about even getting to like Indiana and the radio network, exactly, in Indianapolis, and letting them know. So our organization, we are going to start to work with FHWA and try to get it on the radar ahead of time. There are definitely a number of things that occur between now and then that they still have to get through. But one thing that is translating from the 2017 is managing other work that's going on in the surrounding roadways. So as much as other states contributed to where other state residents drove, from like, let's say Colorado to Wyoming and all, that's going to happen at the local level on a more distinct basis. And then the one thing that we did learn at the state level is that construction projects caused or contributed, or somehow, the scheduling of that needed to be adjusted. So those are a lot of things, but there are tools and strategies available. It might be worth trying to shut down a downtown major area to all vehicle traffic so that you could get, assuming this is post-COVID and we're all out, but imagine blocking down an entire grid downtown and just letting people walk around, visit shops, have events going on. So there's a lot more strategies and options available. It gets a bit daunting, but we are going to start to do our best to reach out, address some of those and anticipate it. I did like the comment from Rick about using the ASE as a dry run for the TSE. That's going to resonate really well with all the Homeland Security, emergency management, it's great. That's kind of the same approach we would see at transportation too.
Patrick,
Great.
Can I just ask a question
Yeah,
of
go ahead.
Patrick too? Something that I had heard of, I think they did this in St. Louis. Were you aware of this? They actually stopped semi-tractor traffic on their roads, I believe 72 hours before the event. And that was huge because it got all the trucks off of the road. Another thing is, I don't know if they did this nationwide, but the worst time to schedule a construction project anywhere near the path would have been the second half of August. And normally that's a time that a lot of states do construction on their highways. But in 2017, that was not a good fit. And I think Kat mentioned that she hit construction, someone hit it coming back. So you don't want any construction going on in early April, even though that might not be a normal time. And it's a great idea to pull truck traffic off the road. However, you can't do that last minute. You have to notify people like my Domino's pizza shop. I'm going to be selling a lot of pizza, but I need to know that I need to get all my food in early or pack it in a truck in a refrigerator like they did at Domino's Pizza in Carbondale, Illinois back in 2017. So it's just, it really has to involve everybody.
Absolutely. I'll be quick on this. I know there's other questions, but great point, Rick. And a lot of people's experiences were different. A few of the states that did restrict construction, they try to do it like, 2 days before, 2 days after, or a couple of days. What they learned was that they just needed it for the day of. And it turns out the day before, day after, it didn't really matter. But the day of, it helped. Day before and after, it just was like dead time, right? Construction could have still been going on because people, when they arrived sporadically, especially if you have the campers coming in first, you have the trends. So that was a big lesson learned. But restricting freight travel, that was also because of the limited detour routes in the rural areas. So that network of communication is already set up. So we just need to make sure the messaging and the plan is clear to everyone. But great points. And it was one of those big lessons learned, some overreacted, some didn't do anything. And then there's a nice little middle in there. So just a day of is mostly what we learned. But that's different when you get down to the city level. So that'll be something that will be explored.
Yeah, I was just reading some of the questions in the Q&A and sort of related to what you all were all talking about in terms of timing. I think it would be useful to put together as broad of a database of events that are happening on and around those dates, both at national, state, and even local levels in terms of holidays. I mean, I remember, so for 2017, we were in the NASA's main broadcast was in Charleston, and City College, the College of Charleston had their college move in that day. So that was the day when all the students were moving in. It was also the day that a lot of schools, K-12 schools, were starting back. I know this was the case in many places around the country. And so that was a huge issue in logistics that people just didn't plan for. And I can imagine that there's so much variety. I saw that, Padma mentioned football and Easter and all these other things. And I think, Kat, was it you that mentioned basketball happening? Yeah. So I think that's definitely a huge need, is really to figure out how to put together all those different events and what sort of impact they might have. So
just to chime in here, I think a big thing that will help with a lot of that is just letting people know now that it happens and having some large organization like NASA call attention to it, so people start planning for it more than like a month in advance.
And I especially I appreciate what Patrick said in terms of getting the people at the highest levels simply aware. And so one of the things that I'm hoping that we can do at the national level is to put together, with the support of the task force, is to put together the messaging so that we can alert all of the agencies at the highest levels to make them just aware of what's going on, so that it's something that they're thinking about. Obviously, as we go farther down the chain, then the people that actually have to really do the work, then they need to know more details. But that's the kind of information that I know we need at the NASA level as we organize across the government, of what kind of messaging can we and using the advice and the expertise, for example, from the AAS task force and all the subcommittees, to bring that messaging to different agencies and organizations. So that's something that will definitely continue, and we look forward to adding that. So panelists, please feel free to jump in at any time. I'm going to let Shannon do some of the questions. Go ahead, Rick.
I'd like to add one more point. I forgot to mention this. What we found is that for those communities, the 10, 11, 12 states that are in the path of totality, and this would involve Mexico and the 3 Canadian provinces as well, because it's on a weekday, the best route to go that way is with an official solar eclipse day bill. Make it an official bill, goes through House legislature, whatever Canada and Mexico have. However, for the annular solar eclipse, that's on a Saturday. So that would probably best be served by a proclamation. And that's a much easier lift than going through the whole Senate, House, governor's desk. So again, if you're involved with the annular solar eclipse, a proclamation will probably suffice. Now, again, for Kat and the rest of you in Texas, you get to do both. You get to do a proclamation for the ASE and then an official bill for the TSE. On the national level, we're starting off trying to get a bill for Monday, April 8th, 2024. And again, just a national bill, just recognizing that. And I'll put it out here. Hopefully the US does it before Mexico and Canada, because whoever does it first is a national bill, just declaring it that day, gets first in North America, recognizing that as a day. But again, for the annular, you really just need a proclamation. Thanks, Alex.
All right, Shannon, do you want to go through the Q&A?
Sure. We have a question from Jim Schweitzer. The Eclipse will go through many cities with planetariums. Will there be support for, say, the production of a planetarium show? I know the Great Lakes Planetarium Association to help because the Eclipse straight through some of their prime locations.
Absolutely, and it's great that you mentioned that. I don't have the graphic easy to pull up, but I do know that Michael Zeiler made a graphic showing all the major planetariums that are in the path of totality, just to start. But absolutely, this is something that I know the AAS task force will be working on in terms of finding out what resources are available, gathering resources. There are many groups that have a lot of experience. I mean, there are folks that are on this particular webinar, for example, Doug Duncan and others who have a huge experience with planetarium. And I know that that many people will be making those kind of resources, which are one of the focuses of NASA and AAS, for example, will be just gather who's doing what and what's the availability of those. So absolutely.
Okay. Are grants or support available from NASA?
So I guess it depends on what kind of grants or support you mean. Right now, for example, there is a call out for NASA through the Science Mission Directorate for education grants that are very specific. There is also a science call out for grants, but I do know there will be there are some through the Office of STEM Engagement, which was formerly the Office of Education at NASA. I don't know exactly what those are, but I'm happy to find out for you. And there will continue to be grants through specific programs, through the different groups at NASA, the Science Directorate, the STEM Engagement, as well as some of the specific programs. You know, there are programs, for example, within the Office of STEM Engagement that are focused on things like, you know, community college, 2-year colleges, SBCUs, tribal colleges, and things like that. So those kinds of supports will also continue. And I'm happy to point anybody to any of those resources.
Okay. Michael Brewster has a question. He says, should we encourage the urban areas in or near the path of totality to declare a holiday or some other management plan to reduce traffic congestion?
So I don't know if you wanted to talk to that, Patrick.
Yeah, I can try. I wonder if some of the other panelists might have some insights into this too. What we are learning is that as much as the government making like some sort of proclamation is one thing, if you get the major employers on board, that pretty much manages a lot of the traffic. I mean, we kind of saw that with COVID, but you also see that with remote work, and you just have them let them stay in. HR managers would be a different kind of route where they can say, oh yeah, it's an extra day that people have. Sometimes they have these company wellness days and employee wellness days. So a lot of the employers are willing to get involved in stuff like this, I would say. And so especially at the urban area and the ones where the communities are quite impactful. But yeah, Brooke, maybe you have some insight too.
Yeah, just quickly, it was really surprising. I think a lot of employers were generous and let people just kind of pop outside and see, but if my mind serves me correctly, like the city didn't, the county didn't, not any private industry that I know of said, hey, like take the full day off. So I think what I saw, Kate Russo mentioned, promote staying at home and viewing, which I think would have been helpful certainly on that Monday if people didn't feel like they needed to be in the downtown plaza or up at the event center. But outside of that, I wish more employers would have. I think people got off early because we had post-Eclipse events downtown, which was very helpful. But it was surprising how many people really just said, well, you're welcome to walk outside and watch it and then come back in and go to work. And I think it has the opportunity to be a bigger deal than that. So I just wanted to contribute that.
Thank you. The next question is from William Tarter Jr. Our city has a NASA presence, as well as a large presence of other federal agencies. What advice would you give an Eclipse planner who wishes to engage federal agencies who may not necessarily be related, space related?
Well, I know Patrick may be able to speak to that based on what he already said. will say from the NASA perspective, I mean, we're not just dealing with space-related agencies, and I think it depends on the agency. Certainly, the agencies like Homeland Security and DOT and FEMA and others are very interested in the planning aspects. But I think it would be very specific as to which ones that you want to engage. I mean, I'm quite happy to talk and work with anyone because we are by no means the only way people can do that or the experts on that. We're just trying to help facilitate the conversations, for example, because we have people and, NASA has a lot of offices within it that have direct relationships with a lot of very, very federal agencies. So that's the advantage of an organization like NASA, but by no means is the only organization that you should go through. And certainly if you can connect with an agency yourself, then I certainly encourage that. And would, if you are in that position, if you have any advice, I will be happy to take that too. But I don't know if Patrick, you wanted to talk some about that.
What seems like a large federal, large state agency usually has some sort of a local, regional, direct on the ground. Even like USDOT's FHWA, Federal Highways Administration, they have division offices. And most of the division offices are the ones that are getting involved in the planning and things like that, working directly with the counties, the cities, the little towns and all. So FEMA, USDOT, DHS, they all have the local offices if you can find them. That's really good. Kat and Rick probably are taking a really positive approach, engaging the elected officials, engaging, some of the more publicly known figures, and they could get those agencies involved right away too. But I'll let them speak for the experience. What we have seen is that once you get one door open, almost all the doors start opening, right? You just find that one person they're going to open doors for you. They'll be like, yeah, I know so-and-so from, we got these 4 done, right? Like, so the Canadian border, I know that I have it in my mind to contact one of the traffic management directors at the Buffalo, New York area, and that should get, Canada on board just from a knowledge and awareness, right? But so every agency has a thing, but I mean, Kat, Rick, do you guys have insights of experience of, talking to one person and then hopefully doors opened up?
I have to mention, so I think you were talking to the other Rick, but I have to mention something here because this is key. I just did Congressional Visits Day with the AAS with Kat. And one of the first things I learned, whenever you're talking to state officials or especially politicians, the first thing you want to say is, I'm not looking for money. Because you're really not, at least right out of the gate, you're not looking for money or something in a solar eclipse day bill or proclamation. You just want them to acknowledge it, just to get the ball rolling, because then the commerce people go, everyone, if you get the politicians interested at some level, then it'll just snowball. And I also have to share, because this is so funny, the very first politician, I won't throw him under the bus, he was a New Hampshire senator 3-4 years ago. I went in, I started talking. He stopped me after about 2 minutes. He says, so you don't want me to stop this eclipse? And I just looked at him. I said, no, Senator, you can't stop this. It's coming no matter what. And he said, well, that's good. When I first heard from you and I scheduled this appointment, I thought you didn't want it. I thought you wanted me to change it or do something to fix it or stop it. So politicians are so used to being asked to fix something or change something or stop something that when they hear something positive coming down the pike, it can be a breath of fresh air. And I think Kat can attend to that. When we did our visits and spoke to congressmen and senators at the state level or their staff, that's what we led with.
Thank you. We have a question from Andrew Fracknoy. Can the interagency group work with the Department of Education to get school supervisor groups to pay attention to the eclipse? Even where teachers were interested, supervisors were often overruled in the 2017 and prevented classes from observing the eclipse.
Can I answer this one?
Go for it.
So I think one of the things we already plan to do and have connections to is, there's all the school districts that were on the path in 2017 that we can reach out to. And you've got different situations all along the path. So for instance, in 2017, where I was along about the middle of the path, it was middle of the day. It wasn't an issue for schools letting out. But if you were in South Carolina, it was the timing of the eclipse was such that it was the end of the school day. We're going to have a similar situation in 2024 with respect to looking at what happens at the New York end of the path. That it's going to coincide with school out time, school buses, all that sort of thing. So this cannot be a one size fits all thing, but it's also something that we do have school districts where there was buy-in, that there was stuff that was done. And so for instance, my own school district in Missouri, the school district bought eclipse glasses for the entire school district. And the superintendent was completely on board. And I think we can definitely get both the superintendent and the science coordinator for that school district involved and talking to other superintendents. But that we need to have a range of representatives from those different types of situations along the path in 2017. So we're talking to the whole of the path in 2024. I agree, we want to have as many people out looking as possible. At the same time, we want to make sure we're sensitive to some of those local issues. I should also say one of the things that I've discovered since moving to Texas is that the Texas K through 12 curriculum, which does not follow the national science standards, has much more astronomy in it than the national standards does. And so we also need to be aware of where that's going to impact what's going on in states. I suspect it's going to be easier here in Texas to engage than it is elsewhere because astronomy is a bigger piece of the curriculum. So again, we absolutely should do this, Andy, at the same time, thinking about it as not one size fits all.
This might be an example of where also the top down and the bottom up method will complement each other, because what you're talking about, Angela, which I think is critical, is maybe, you know, for example, having members of the education subcommittee focusing on the regional modification, and then having the national group focus on, for example, working both with the Department of Education to let them know, but also the representatives in OSTP that are focused on science education to basically infuse that information to the national level so it trickles down, but then you're focusing on really hitting the regional groups, which are different, and the people that are really the people that are making those decisions. So
awesome. Alex, this question is for you from Matt Penn. Are you looking to get NASA Eclipse representation outside of Helio to aid Eclipse citizen scientists to continue work with occultations, exoplanets, lunar impacts, etc.?
Absolutely. From the science point of view, yes. I mean, one of the things we did in 2017 when we put together our resources for subject matter experts to engage the public was to connect what, you know, eclipses to transits to exoplanets. And one of the areas that we can work with is both in citizen science, but also outside of heliophysics with the, for example, the leadership in planetary and astrophysics. I mean, I know, for example, that the head of astrophysics at NASA is, you know, hugely excited about eclipses and interested in that. And they're both planetary and astrophysics are interested in making those connections. So long story short, yes. And it's something we can definitely talk about across the Science Mission Directorate.
Great. Padma has another question. When does NASA plan to identify SMEs for 2023 and 2024 eclipses?
It's something we're working on doing soon. I mean, one of the things that came out of the 2017 eclipse is because NASA did things much later, we didn't have time to coordinate across the agency and really utilize the resources in a more efficient way. And of course, one of the biggest resources that many of you know are the solar system ambassadors. So many people who are qualified, especially through amateur astronomers, to you know, be ambassadors and subject matter experts outside of just those who do the kind of science. So we'll be utilizing the solar system ambassadors to be the subject matter experts. Now, as far as SMEs applying for grants, I don't know. I mean, I guess it depends on what kind of grants you mean. I don't know if you can clarify that a little bit, but part of what we had to do is reach outside of traditional scientists, because as you mentioned, as many people have mentioned, traditional scientists wanted to be in the path of totality and didn't necessarily want to be as involved in helping to engage the public. But there are a lot of folks like the solar system ambassadors who are very excited to do that. And it gives us a much larger pool of people to support what's happening across the country. I hope that answered your question. I'm not quite sure. Mini grants. She said mini grants, STEAM grants. Well, that is going to come out of, there will be some more probably out of SMD. I don't know, but there will be some that also come out of the Office of STEM Engagement. So it's something that we can talk about offline.
Okay. Another, this isn't necessarily a question, but I thought it was good, was from Charles Folco. Was basically, he went to Rochester, New York last week. And he was very pleased with their cross communication with traffic control, visitors bureau, solar viewers, and campaigns. He was very impressed with their coordination. I just thought that was something nice to share and highlight. Let's see, and then there's another question. Would some of from Lori Roach? Would some of the NASA grants for education be available to Canadian groups?
That is a great question, and I don't know the answer to that, but that is something that I can talk to NASA leadership. It's a little bit tricky. NASA grants, depending on the kinds of grants, are typically only available to folks in the US or who have a relationship with a US organization. They don't have to be a US citizen. For example, I know scientists who are, are not US citizens, but have relationships with universities or other nonprofits, so they can do NASA grants even if they live outside of NASA. So I do suspect there are things that we can do. We certainly would want to support the work of Canada and Mexico. So it's something that please follow up with me about, and we can investigate further. And if there's a will, there's a way, and we'll see what we can find for solutions to support Canada's efforts.
Okay, thank you. So we have one more question. It's from Fraser Farrell. Here in Australia, we have a tradition of stopping the nation for a few moments of the Melbourne Cup. The race occurs at a known time and lasts for minutes, similar to a totality. Is there a similar tradition you can leverage in the US, Canada, and Mexico?
That might be something worth pursuing, Alex, because someone else asked about there was some tri-agreement between Mexico, the US, and Canada in regards to traffic lights, making them the same so that when you travel.
Let me clarify. That's not, no, they wrote, Mexico, Canada, and the United States worked together to write a booklet so that people traveling amongst the three countries would have a knowledge of what the different similar traffic stop signs and things like that. But there is differently, that's just something that we, on a smaller side for Federal Highway, but there is a long-standing trilateral agreement among Canada, the US, and Mexico. And I don't think you need to reinvent the wheel. You need to find the people in the various federal agencies who work border issues. There's certainly a very strong relationship between Canada and the United States because of the St. Lawrence Seaway and all the border. Very strong activity through the US DOT, but I assume it's across the federal departments. And I would think NASA could work grants with their counterpart in Canada. I don't know how that works, but there is a very strong relationship that has been in place for many years. And I would say, don't reinvent the wheel. That was my point.
Absolutely. I think I'm glad you brought that up. It's a very good point. Yes, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We have a strong relationship, and certainly at the NASA level, there's two aspects. There is a strong relationship between the space agencies. All three countries have a space agency, but also there is the Office of International Affairs at NASA, which would be the first person that I would talk to help. And I think that's a great idea. And I don't know that that's, something that we would have to start from scratch by any means.
I think they would be absolutely delighted to promote this kind of three-country effort. There is no downside to this. And if you use this, we've had a really, the pandemic has caused a lot of friction. This would be a great, I would think if you could get the three countries to do a three-way proclamation, what a wonderful start that would be to this.
I think it's a great idea. I'm glad it was brought up, and I'm glad you dug into it. I think that should be something on the top of our list to bring back to HQ and get the ball rolling. So I'm gonna, well, go ahead, Shannon. You've got two more questions, and then I think we need to start winding down.
Okay. This one is for Brook. It's from Zach Stockbridge. Speaking to the issues of volunteers, did you have good success with volunteers for helping at your event in 2017?
Zach, that's a great question. So I think initially organizing everyone was very difficult. Our community, maybe a year prior, launched a frontline training program so that any resident who wanted to better understand how to interact with a visitor while they were here, we were able to train them. And then two, what was really interesting is most of our residents, just by nature of how our event flowed, actually became the volunteers. So we pulled on people that we normally do for events, but a lot of our residents were more than happy to answer visitor questions in real time where they interacted. So it was a little bit of both.
Great, thank you, Brook.
So last question I'll answer before Angela gets too mad at me. So webpage. We have a lot of issues with NASA because we're trying to consolidate web pages because we have so many in the federal government. We currently have a temporary website at nasa.gov/Eclipse. We will have a permanent one as soon as possible, probably at least a starter in the next couple of months at solarsystem.nasa.gov, which is a great site. You should check it out anyway, but it's going to have a permanent location for eclipses. So, all right. I'm done, Angela. It's all yours.
Thanks Alex. And thanks to
panel.
everybody who has been on the panels today and our speakers. I think it's been a really great day, and I'm just going to try and close things out now. We've got basically 5 minutes left. So this was obviously just the first of what we hope will be at least annual workshops heading for the next 3 years, basically, so that we can plan for the next eclipse. Now, for those of you that weren't with us yesterday, there was some discussion of the fact that we have the opportunity for you to put in a proposal to host a workshop. I hope that our next workshops will be in person, as lovely as it is to be in my bedroom while I'm talking to you. It's hopefully, I think it would be really great if we can all get together. So please be looking on the website. This is the eclipse.aas.org website. There is a place there where you can see that we're looking for proposals for our next round. And again, we didn't cover everything. Some of the things that came up in this session around education in particular were specifically not covered because we didn't think they were the very first things that needed to be discussed. This was meant to be our opening salvo of here are the things that you need to do now. And it looks like probably Rick is putting things into, or maybe Claire, putting things into the chat so you can see there is a link for proposals for hosting a workshop. There's also a link for becoming a member of one of the subcommittees. We have a bunch of subcommittees and we want people that they shouldn't just be staffed by members of the task force. We want people to volunteer. I think we've already got quite a few, but go and have a look and see where you fit. And again, I just want to thank everybody, especially the ASP folks who staffed and ran the virtual networking that we had in between sessions. I think that was a really great thing for us to have, that people managed to talk to each other. And especially to my co-conspirators, Rick and Claire, because they put in a lot of work to making this work. And it looks like Rick just put in one more thing in the chat, which is we have an email address for the task force, which is eclipse@aas.org. If you have any questions about anything, we do have recordings of all 4 sessions. So 2 yesterday, 2 today, that will be put on YouTube. I think they're just being mildly edited to get rid of dead time at the beginning and end. So make sure that you check out those and share with people that may not have managed to see this, may not have managed to join us for the workshop. And with that,
can I chime in one last thing, Angela,
absolutely.
just because I heard from a few people that there was a lot of information that we were throwing at everybody. And I just want to say that we are doing our best to collect everything in one place. So if you need some information, I recommend that you start with the eclipse.aas.org webpage and suss out the site that we have for this particular workshop, which is on the far right menu. And all of the YouTube links, all of the other links that we've been sharing, we're going to try and collect into a single coherent place that will hopefully make it a little easier to work through rather than trying to keep track of all of the chat. We'll also have all of the questions that were and weren't answered from the workshop today that we'll pull together. Any that weren't answered, we'll try and get some answers and post them to that page as well. And a final message to just say thank you to the many folks who've already volunteered to join the subcommittee. And if you are thinking about it, we were also looking for people to host future workshops. And so don't forget that there's the information on the webpage for that. So that eclipse.aas.org webpage is the go-to spot for all the things.
All the things.
Make things easier.
Okay, and with that, thank you, everybody, and I hope that I will see you in person at the next one of these things.
Indeed. Thank you, everybody. Take care.